Shabbat Shalom. The problem with having a vivid imagination, as my teachers and family used to describe me as a child, is that it can sometimes take you to places you don't really want to go. It means that when I watched Rachel Goldberg Polin eulogize her son and apologize to him for not saving him, despite what can truly only be described as heroic efforts on her part, I begin to imagine. I step into an imaginary world where I find myself in that same horrific position. Would I have gone to such lengths? Would I have been able to even get out of bed? And immediately when I think of my children, I know that I would have done whatever I could have possibly done to save one of them. But that's a place that even in my imagination, I don't really want to go. That is a world I wish I didn't have to imagine. No, that is a world I wish I was unable to imagine. And to know that this is the reality for Hirsch Goldberg Polin's family and for the families of Aidan Yerushalmi, Carmel Gat, Almog Sarusi, Alex Lebonov, Ori Danino, it's simply unbearable to fathom. After we became aware of the hostages being held in Gaza last year, I held a post-Kiddush learning on the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim, redeeming captives. Unfortunately, much of the source material on the subject had already been compiled because we had already needed to study it. Unfortunately, our people have had to consider the right approach to redeeming captives since ancient times. The sages of the Talmud declared that redeeming captives is a great mitzvah. By the time of Maimonides, the importance and fervor around this mitzvah only increased. In the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam claims that redeeming captives takes priority over feeding and clothing the poor. Bringing in verse after verse from the Torah to prove his point, he concludes that there is no greater mitzvah than redeeming captives. I look back at the source sheet that I had created for that learning session so many months ago, and I read it again this week. And I read these texts with a heavy heart. I couldn't help feeling as though collectively, as a people, we have failed to learn these texts well enough. As a people, we have failed to fulfill what Rambam deemed the most important mitzvah. There's another text that's been weighing on my heart, not only this week, but for almost a year now. And it came to mind as an internal struggle that I have been trying to work out for months, started to come into stark relief this week. Why did I feel so completely wrecked by the murder of these 6 hostages when for months we have seen so many deaths as a result of this war? I thought again of a teaching whose source is found in both Jewish and Islamic sacred texts. Destroy one life, destroy the entire world. Save one life, save the entire world. That's not the exact wording, though. That's how we usually describe it. In the Quran, we find this teaching in the 5th surah in the context of some discussions about our people, and as part of a retelling of the biblical story of Cain and Abel. The Quran's version reads, "For this reason we have ordained for the children of Israel that whoever kills a person, unless it be for manslaughter or for mischief in the land, it is as though he had killed all men. And whoever saves a life, it is as though he had saved the lives of all men." The source for this teaching in Jewish tradition is found in the Mishnah, in Tractate Sanhedrin. In the Mishnah, the story of Cain and Abel is also part of the lead up to the teaching, but there's a bit more drashing involved. And here's something that surprised me, took my breath away. This section of Sanhedrin is, of course, expanding on the very laws we find in our Torah portion this week. Why this surprises me each time, I don't know, because I frequently stand up here and talk about the synchronicity between the Torah portion and what's going on in our world, or a text I was looking for, and there it's related to our Torah portion. But in any case, in Shoftim, we read about the requirement of 2 or more witnesses in capital cases. And the Torah is adamant about this, restating it again in the same verse in 2 different ways. It says, no one shall be put to death on the testimony of a single witness, after it's already said we need 2. The Mishnah picks up on the spirit of this verse and adds that the witnesses should be thoroughly interrogated and intimidated. It says that the court should say to the witnesses, and I'm leaving out a little bit, but here's part of what it says you should say to them. You should know that cases of capital law are not like cases of monetary law. In cases of monetary law, a person who testifies falsely, causing money to be given to the wrong party, can give the money to the proper owner. His sin is atoned for. In cases of capital law, one who testifies falsely, the blood of the accused and the blood of his offspring that he did not merit to produce are ascribed to the witness's testimony until eternity. So not only the person who was wrongly killed in a capital case, but his offspring. The proof for this is as we found with Cain, who killed his brother. As it is stated concerning him, the voice of your brother's blood cries out to me. But the Hebrew word for blood is demeh. The verse does not state your brother's blood, dam, in the singular, but rather your brother's blood in the plural. This serves to teach that the loss of both his brother's blood and the blood of his brother's offspring are ascribed to Cain. The court continues, telling the witnesses, therefore, the first human being was created alone to teach you that with regard to anyone who destroys one soul from Israel, i.e. kills one Jew, the verse ascribes him blame as if he destroyed an entire world, as Adam was one person from whom the population of an entire world came forth. And conversely, anyone who saves one soul from Israel, the verse ascribes him credit as if he sustained the entire world. Now, if you remember how I described the teaching originally, it wasn't specific to the Jewish people, right? It didn't say one who kills a Jewish soul or one who saves a Jewish soul, but our Mishnah, that's how it's written. And this can be explained by the fact that there are actually different manuscripts with different versions of this. So in some of the oldest surviving codices of the Mishnah, which date to the Middle Ages, we have a different version of our precept in which the words in Israel are left out. One of these, written in Parma, Italy in the mid-13th century reads, whoever destroys a single life is considered by Scripture to have destroyed the whole world, and whoever saves a single life is considered by Scripture to have saved the whole world. Rashi appears to have possessed a similar version, for in his commentary on the precept he writes, therefore man was created singly. This shows that from a single man the entire world, not all Israel, but the entire world was created. Rashi's comment appears to be more in keeping with these other codices that are different from our standard Mishnah text. There's obviously a significant difference here, and I appreciate you following me down this rabbit hole because it interested me not only from an intellectual standpoint, but from an ethical one. As I noticed myself feeling so distraught over the deaths of these 6 hostages, I kept wondering, why is this hitting me so hard? I didn't know them personally. And I'm guessing for that many of us who are so brokenhearted, there's an element of questioning that. In his podcast this week, Yehuda Kurtzer offered a way of thinking about this that resonated deeply and also gave me a permission that I didn't realize I needed. And that is the permission to honor both the truth of my particularistic attachments as well as my commitment to all of human life. Here's how he described it. Maybe this phenomenon is better described by what you might call an ethics of familiarity. For many of us American Jews, we may not have known Hirsch, but we kind of feel like we do, because the stories about him resonate with our sense of our own kids. All of us have categories of identity and our experience of others which are forged by the people we're closest to. Those people, our kin, shape our very field of vision and how we make sense of strangers, and what patterns we look for that make us feel close or distant. The ethics of proximity and the ethics of familiarity serve us well in enabling us to feel the pain of others. They can actually become engines of empathy, he says. But he also says that some philosophers worry about this. Couldn't this approach be wrong or dangerous? If our empathy can be shaped in this way by proximity and familiarity, does the reverse become true, that those we are not actually connected to, those we don't recognize, struggle to earn our empathy? As an expression of this concern, the philosopher Martha Nussbaum wrote back in 2002 that our society should be designed to cultivate the kind of empathy for the other such that we would treat all means of classifying identity, race, gender, nationality, religion, socioeconomic class, all of these categories of identity should be treated as morally irrelevant. The counter-argument to those who would argue for the kind of flat morality that Nussbaum suggested is that only really extremist ethics would argue that we have no hierarchy of responsibility whatsoever, as though we're equally indebted to the needs of a total stranger as we are to our own children. Most philosophers and most normal people know that we operate as humans with spheres of loyalty that radiate out. They start with those who are close to us, and they extend eventually to strangers and maybe even to our enemies. We don't need to insist that our loyalties are the same to friend and foe, but we do need to acknowledge that our resources of empathy cannot be limited to and exhausted by just our friends and families. Nussbaum herself actually got to this place later in her writings. She became a strong advocate for what she calls patriotic love, what we Jews sometimes call ahavat Yisrael, that our attachments to our group, our nation, can and should be emotional, even as we're never meant to limit the full scope of our love and compassion for others and just reserve it for our own people. Maybe the easiest way to say it is, I can love different humans differently while striving to never make any of them expendable. I think this is essentially where I've landed this year. I know that I've said more prayers for Jews and Israelis than I have for Palestinians, both publicly and privately, and I know that's hard for some people to hear. I want to be clear that this is not in any way because I believe one life is more precious or more expendable than the other. But the emotional responses that have fueled these prayers have indeed been the result of a sense of the kind of ethics of familiarity that Kurtzer describes. There's another aspect of this, the flip side of the coin, that Kurtzer doesn't address, at least not overtly. And for me, it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. It's a crucial piece of the puzzle of the ethics of familiarity. The strong empathic response that comes with a sense of attachment to my people also comes with a strong sense of responsibility to call out my own people, to speak up when I see us moving in the wrong direction. I spoke earlier about our failures. We saw our failures hit us in the face this week. That there was also a shooting. That there was also a shooting in Georgia on what was my own daughter's first day of the school year, reminding me that we have continued to fail our children in this country as well. After a video of Hirsch's last moments was released by Hamas earlier this week, his parents, Rachel and John, responded by saying the following: "We are in the midst of the 7-day Jewish mourning period after burying our son Hirsch of blessed memory on Monday. Earlier tonight, Hamas released a new video of him taken while he was being held hostage in the tunnels underneath Gaza. This must serve as an immediate wake-up call to the world to take action today to secure the release of the remaining 101 hostages before it is too late. No other family should go through what our family and the families of the other recently executed hostages have endured." The Goldberg Polans are telling us that we need a wake-up call. If we're truly listening, then when we hear the sound of the shofar being sounded during Elul in the mornings this month, and the sound of their wailing, we realize they are the same thing. It is not enough for us to cry and pray with them. Our tradition and some of our most precious people are calling for us to wake up, to change our path, to do teshuvah, collective teshuvah. I agree with Hirsch's parents. No other family should have to go through what they went through. There are 101 hostages still in Gaza. I don't know exactly how to bring them home, but I know that we must. And I know it is not only something that we should feel like doing, but it is, as the Rambam tells us, the greatest mitzvah. I also know that we can do better at keeping our promises to our children. One way we show them is that we prioritize their lives. That means not sacrificing our children for politics. That means taking seriously the issue of gun violence in our country. It means not just telling them we love them, but showing it, chasing after their welfare with the kind of zeal, the zrizut, that Rachel Goldberg-Polin had for rescuing her child. And not only in the moments when the threats are acutely obvious, but having that same zrizut even when they're not in our face. Another piece of keeping our promises involves making their Jewish education a high priority. We owe it to them to gift them with access to the beautiful, complex, morally grounded tradition we have inherited, and to invite them into the interpretive process that makes it a living tradition. What I see happening in our shul today is a commitment to doing at least these two things, and I'd like to think that there's more. And we're making those commitments visible today. Today, two beautiful things are happening in the life of our shul, in our little corner of the Jewish world. One, the opening of our new education program, Limudim, our learning community. And two, the unveiling of our last panel for this series of Beth Jacobs Oral History Project. Both of these represent aspects of our community of which we should feel extremely proud. The messaging of these two significant moments occurring on the same day, I hope it's clear. We need to honor both our past and our future in order to live out the promise we make every time we recite the Kedusha, L'dor vador nagid godlecha. From generation to generation, we will tell of your greatness. We didn't keep the promise of L'dor vador for Hirsch. He will never know the joy of teaching his children the Shema as he tucks them into bed, or seeing them read Torah from the Bima at their B'nai Mitzvah. We certainly can do better at keeping our promises. I'm reminded of the irony found in one of the songs that's been both really hard to listen to and also that I can't seem to stop listening to since October 7th. It's by an Israeli hip-hop duo, both of whom have Ethiopian roots. Their group is called Cafe Shachor Chazak, Strong Black Coffee. And the song is called Yeh Beseder. It's been everywhere on Spotify playlists, created by people turning to music as a way of finding comfort and resilience. Here are the opening lyrics of their song. Ani yodea she'akol yeh beseder, lo meshane ma kulam omrim beseter, nitan brosh be'ezrat Hashem, bli neder. I know that everything will be okay. It doesn't matter what everyone says. We'll nail it with the help of God. No promises. Bli neder, no promises, is a colloquial phrase used in Hebrew when someone wants to commit to something, but also acknowledge that life can get in the way of that commitment. Perhaps this phrase has some connection to our annulment of vows on Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre. But I think we should be more cautious about using this phrase. When we assume that we won't be able to keep our promises, it's easier not to make them in the first place. When I look at our shul community today, I see people here to celebrate our history, to celebrate Shabbat, here to invest in lifelong learning and growth, here to honor our past and to do our best to keep our promises to our children, not to nullify them. And that makes me think that maybe the words of that song, maybe the words Ani yodea she'akol yeh beseder, don't have to only be aspirational. Maybe we can make them come true. For Hirsch, zichrono livracha, and for all our children. Shabbat shalom.